In this lesson, we're continuing our discussion of mutual assent. At this point, we've talked about how an offer is formed, how an offer is terminated. Now we need to talk about how an offer is actually accepted. But before we jump into our discussion of acceptance, as a quick refresher, how do we go about forming a traditional enforceable contract? Remember, we have three elements. We need mutual assent between the parties, consideration, and no defenses to formation that would invalidate the otherwise valid contract. In case you're wondering right now where we are in the big picture flow of our contract law analysis, we're still talking about formation. We're still on the M and my cats do sneak, which of course stands for mutual assent. And what is mutual assent? Remember, mutual assent is simply the idea that we say there needs to be a meeting of the minds between the parties. In order to have a traditional enforceable contract, we need a meeting of the minds, some sort of mutual understanding or mutual agreement. And how do we make that determination as to whether or not we have mutual assent on a contract law fact pattern? Remember, we need to determine whether we have a valid offer and a valid acceptance of that offer. Once we determine that we have an offer and acceptance, then we know we have mutual assent between the parties. And at this point in our discussion of mutual assent, we've talked about how an offer is formed, how an offer can be terminated before acceptance. Now we're finally ready to move on to the second half of our discussion of mutual assent and talk about acceptance. So again, at this point in the analysis, what we're basically saying is we have a live offer. We've determined that we have the formation of a valid offer. We went through those three elements. We determined that the offeror manifested an objective willingness to enter into the agreement that created a power of acceptance in a specific offeree that specified all the necessary terms of the deal. So we know we have a valid offer, and we've also determined that nothing happened in the timeline that terminated the offer. So I like to say that we have a live offer, right? All that's left in our mutual assent analysis is discuss whether we have acceptance of that offer. And how do we do that? Well, our starting point is going to be these two core elements, right? To accept the offer, the offeree must, number one, have the power of acceptance, and number two, manifest acceptance in accordance with the terms established by the offeror, who is master of the offer. So in this lesson, we need to break these two elements down in some detail. Now, the key to recognize before we move on and really start talking about these elements is that even if these two elements are satisfied, our analysis of acceptance is not over. We still have some really big issues we need to think about, and I'll preview these issues at the end of this lesson, and we'll get into them in more detail in future videos. But for now, I just want us all to recognize that just because these two core elements are satisfied, it does not mean that our acceptance analysis is concluded. We still need to think about these other issues. Now, if these other issues are not relevant, they're not at issue in your contract law fact pattern, and both of these elements are satisfied, then we very well could have a valid acceptance, right? So these are always your core elements that you want to start the acceptance analysis with, because if either of these are missing, you know right off the top, oh, well, we don't have a valid acceptance. Either number one or number two is missing. Boom, boom. Right off the top, we know, okay, we don't have a valid acceptance. But even if these two are satisfied, right, we're still going to want to think about these other issues over here, which we'll talk about later, right? Just a quick note. But let's go ahead and jump into these core elements. To accept the offer, the offeree must, number one, have the power of acceptance. This is pretty straightforward, right? Remember, in our video on offer formation, we said to form a valid offer, the offeror must create a power of acceptance in a specific offeree. Generally, right? We said that there was this limited exception for contest and reward offers and very specific advertisements that left nothing open to negotiation. But our general rule was that the offeror had to create a power of acceptance in a specific offeree. Well, this first element just says that to accept, the offeree must be the person that the offeror created the power of acceptance in. So, for example, if I look right at you and I say, I offer to sell you this dry erase marker for $5, right? Well, I've created a power of acceptance in you and only you. So if there's someone standing behind you, if there's someone standing over here that hears this offer, they can't validly accept it. They do not have the power of acceptance. When I, the offeror, made my offer, when I formed my offer, I created the power of acceptance in you. I said, I offer to sell you this dry erase marker for $5. Didn't offer it to this guy, to this guy, to the guy behind you, right? I created the power of acceptance in you. So you are the only person that has the power of acceptance, right? So you, though, would satisfy this first element because you are the person that has the power of acceptance. So the main idea here is you want to look out for a situation where, some other person hears the offer and tries to accept it. They do not have the power of acceptance. Now, if you remember though, right, I'm sure some of you are asking, well, what about contests and reward offers that do not create a power of acceptance in any specific offeree? Remember, I said if I go around the neighborhood and I post signs up that say missing cat, reward $100 to anyone who finds and returns my missing cat to me. Well, I'm not creating a power of acceptance in any specific offeree, but we said that that was an exception as a contest or reward offer to the rule that you have to create a specific power of acceptance in a specific offeree. So that's still a valid offer, going around and hanging up the flyers, right? So in that case, how do we deal with this first element? Well, what we say here is that in order to accept a contest or reward offer, the offeree has to, at minimum, be aware that the contest or reward offer exists. So, for example, if you are going around the neighborhood, and say we both live in the same neighborhood, and you know who I am, and you know what my cats look like, and you're just going around the neighborhood, and you see my cat wandering around, and you're like, oh wow, this cat is lost. This is an inside cat. This shouldn't be out in the neighborhood roaming around. I'm just gonna return this to Michael, do him a solid, right? But you have no idea that this reward offer's out there. You don't see the flyers that I've hung up. You just, as a good Samaritan, see the cat, pick it up, return it to me, and leave. But let's say the next day you see one of the flyers and you're like, oh wait, Michael was offering a $100 reward for returning the missing cat. You try to call me up and say, hey Michael, I saw your reward offer, I'd like to accept that, right? That's not going to work. At the time you performed that contest or reward offer, you had to at least be aware that it existed in order to accept it. Otherwise, your acceptance is invalid. So calling later and trying to accept is going to be invalid. So under this first element, at minimum, we say that the offeree has to at least be aware that the offer existed. And most of the time, right, this is going to be obvious. Unless it's a contest or reward offer, if you're accepting the offer, then you knew it existed, right? If I say, I offer to sell you this dry erase marker for $5, you know that the offer exists, right? So the only time you really see that concept tested is that fact pattern. You have a contest or reward offer, Good Samaritan completes the contest or reward but didn't know it existed, then he finds out later and tries to collect. Not going to work, right? But the main idea is, remember, in formation, our general rule of offer formation is that the offeror has to create an offer in a specific offeree. The idea here, mainly, most of the time, is that that person who the power of acceptance was created in has to be the person accepting. It can't be someone else that just happened to be around and heard the offer. They do not have the power of acceptance, can't satisfy this first element to form a valid acceptance. Okay, so our second element is also pretty straightforward, a little bit tricky here, but let's break it down. To accept the offer, the offeree must, number one, have the power of acceptance, and number two, manifest acceptance in accordance with the terms established by the offeror, who is master of the offer. So in contract law, we have this term of art, the master of the offer. And what this essentially means is that the offeror is free to request acceptance of his offer in almost any way that he chooses. For example, I can say to you, I offer to sell you this dry erase marker for $5. In order to accept, you must send me a signed letter via mail in the next 3 days. You cannot simply say, I accept, and validly accept my offer, right? I'm master of the offer, and I'm saying to accept, you have to send me a signed letter. So if you want to accept, because I'm master of the offer and I can request acceptance in almost any way that I wish, if you want to accept, you have to play by my rules. You have to send me that signed letter within 3 days to accept my offer, right? This is the idea that the offeror is master of the offer. And if the offeree wants to accept an offer, he has to manifest acceptance in accordance with the terms established by the offeror, who is master of the offer. So usually this is pretty straightforward. If I'm requesting acceptance by a signed letter, you have to send me a signed letter to accept. You can't just say, I accept, and think you have a valid acceptance. That's not going to work. Now, where this can get a little bit interesting is the difference between bilateral offers and unilateral offers. So as master of the offer, the offeror can choose to create a bilateral offer or a unilateral offer, and it has to be one or the other, right? A bilateral offer is the default offer. If the master of the offer, the offeror, does not specify any specific way in which the offeree must accept, then it is a bilateral offer by default. So if I simply say to you, I offer to sell you this dry erase marker for $5, that by itself is a bilateral offer. I'm not requesting any specific performance you must complete in order to accept. I'm just saying I offer to sell you this dry erase marker. That means it's a bilateral offer. Then a bilateral offer, if the offeror forms a bilateral offer, the offeree can accept that offer in one of two ways. He can either start performance, which in this case would just be handing me the $5, right? I offer to sell you this dry erase marker for $5. You can accept by starting performance, which would be handing me the $5, or you can accept by manifesting an objective willingness to enter into the agreement, which would simply be saying something like, I accept. And remember, this whole idea of objective willingness, we talked a lot in our offer formation. Remember, we said that the offer is governed by an objective test. Same thing applies to acceptance. The acceptance is governed by an objective test. So the example again, remember, if someone says, I accept, but they have their fingers crossed behind their back and they don't really intend on accepting, we don't care about the offeree's subjective hidden intentions. It's only going to be how would a reasonable person interpret the appearances of their outward words and actions. So if you simply say, I accept with a straight face, that's a manifestation of objective willingness to enter into the agreement. We do not care about the offeree's hidden intentions, okay? But again, for a bilateral offer, something like I offer to sell you this dry erase marker for $5, you can accept in one of two ways, starting performance or manifesting an objective willingness to enter into the agreement. A return promise, something like saying I accept, right? But that's for bilateral offers. And remember, that's our default offer. What happens if the offeror, who is master of the offer, creates a unilateral offer? And the classic unilateral offer is the contest or reward offer. This is what everyone always talks about, contract professors, contract textbooks. Anytime you see what is the example of a unilateral offer, I bet if you Google it right now, the first thing that's going to pop up is contest and reward offers. Because by its nature, right, if I'm saying to you, I will pay you $100 when you find and return my missing cat to me, you can't simply say, I accept, right? You actually have to go out, find my cat, and return it to me to collect the $100, right? I, as master of the offer, am requesting acceptance by specific performance. I'm saying, in order to get this $100, you must find the cat and return it to me, right? That's a unilateral offer. And the only way that an offeree can accept a unilateral offer is by completing performance, right? Now, there is this idea of a notice requirement where we say if it's not obvious to the offeror that performance has been completed, we do require that the offeree send a notice that performance has been completed. But the general rule, right, especially for a contest or reward offer, is that completion of performance is when the acceptance becomes effective. Now, a few of you, right? For bonus points though, remember from our last video, something does happen though that's interesting with unilateral offers. When the offeree starts performance on a unilateral offer, something happens. It's not acceptance, but what happens when an offeree starts performance on a unilateral offer, right? We talked about this in our last video, bonus points if someone gets it. Right? What happens? The offer becomes irrevocable, right? So it's not acceptance, but the offer does become irrevocable. So continuing with this example, if I say to you, I will pay you $100 when you find and return my missing cat to me, what happens when you start canvassing the neighborhood? You pull out your flashlight and you go looking for my cat. You've started performance. Well, at that point, right, offer has been formed, you begin performance. At this moment in time, what happens? The offer becomes irrevocable. I can't call you while you're out there looking for the cat and say, you know what, I changed my mind, I revoke the offer. It's an irrevocable offer now. But it's not an acceptance until you complete performance. How do you complete performance? You find the cat and you hand it to me, right? You find the cat and you come ring my doorbell and put that cat in my arms, right? Now you've completed performance, so you've accepted the offer, right? And that's the rule for unilateral offers. So it's a two-stage timeline, right? And it's critical to recognize both of these. So we have the formation of the unilateral offer, right? I offer to pay you $100 when you find and return my cat to me. Okay, you go out and start to look for the cat. Offer becomes irrevocable. You find the cat and hand it to me. That's the acceptance. Right, so a common fact pattern though, and something that's tested a lot, is in this liminal phase between when the performance begins and when the performance is completed. That time where you're out there looking for the cat, right, with your flashlight. What happens if you just give up and you abandon performance halfway through? Can I sue you for breach of contract? Right? Under a traditional enforceable contract theory, do you have any obligation to finish your performance? You've started. Is there a contractual obligation for you to finish performance? Well, let's think about this. What's our first element of the traditional enforceable contract? Mutual assent. What does that require? Offer and acceptance. Well, we have an offer, but when you've started performance of a unilateral offer, is that acceptance? No, right? So we don't have mutual assent, which means we don't have an element required to form a traditional enforceable contract. So we can't have breach of a traditional enforceable contract, right? So, long way of saying there's no contractual obligation to finish performance. Right? Because we don't have mutual assent. We don't have a meeting of the minds yet. You've started performance, but it's not an acceptance until you complete performance. So watch out for that fact pattern. You see that a lot with like half-built construction, right? Someone's halfway through building something and then they abandon the project and the offeror wants to sue for breach. Not going to be able to do that under a traditional enforceable contract theory because you did not have mutual assent. Did not have a valid acceptance because performance was not completed. Now that's all dependent on the fact that the offer is unilateral, that the offeror who is master of the offer, actually requested acceptance by performance. If the offeror does not specify any performance as the means of acceptance, then we know it's a bilateral offer. In a bilateral offer, acceptance is formed when performance is started, right? Which is very different. So imagine that we have a bilateral offer, right? Thank you so much for watching this video preview of our Legal Education Accelerator Program, or LEAP for short. If you would like to see the conclusion of this video and gain full access to our entire 1L and 2L video library, integrated outlines, streamable audio versions, additional practice exams with explanations, and much more, we invite you to head over to our website and join the thousands of law students who have already enrolled. To get started with your no-risk free trial today, simply click the link in the description box below or visit www.studicata.com/leap.
Hi everyone, my name is Serena and I'm currently a law student at South Texas College of Law, Houston.
Hi everybody, my name is Shiva and I'm currently a law student at Southwestern.
Hi everyone, my name is Michelle and I am a first year student at South Texas College of Law, Houston. I used the Studicata study video series last semester to help me prepare mostly for contracts, and I actually made an A+ in contracts last semester, which I greatly dedicate to the Studicata videos.
By using Studicata to help me prepare for my final exam, I was able to score the highest grade out of my class on the final and even have my essay distributed as the model answer. Not to mention I had done quite poorly on the midterm and was struggling throughout the whole course of the semester, understanding the material and keeping up with lectures.
Because of the Studicata video lectures, I was able to go into my exams with a feeling of confidence. I didn't have to worry about what the rules of law were or how I was going to organize my answer to an essay question.
I would absolutely recommend the Studicata series and their online course materials to anyone. I think that they are not like professor lectures that you might find online or other outside study materials that you may encounter. I think that the Studicata videos really focus on not only ensuring that you understand the material that you're going to encounter on your final, but they also help you to understand kind of the best method for test taking, and they really break down how to approach each problem and the best ways to tackle certain methods on testing, and I think that's really important, and I think it's really special. I don't see that anywhere else in any of the other online resources that I've found. So I would certainly recommend Studicata to anyone who is studying in law school right now. Good luck on your studying and you're going to do great.
I would definitely recommend Studicata to anybody watching this video. Give it a chance. I'm positive that you will love it, that you will get a lot out of it, and that you will be happy that you gave it a chance. I definitely am. I know I will be using Studicata in the future.
And I cannot thank Studicata enough for getting me through my first semester of law school. I will definitely continue to watch the Studicata video lectures throughout my law school career, and I highly recommend that any future or current law student do the same.